The Zodiac Killer terrorized San Francisco in the late 60s, taunting police with coded messages and claims of dozens of murders.
Killing is his compulsion.
The case is so bizarre and notorious, it inspired a Hollywood movie in 2007 featuring Robert Downey Jr. and Jake Gyllenhaal.
The Zodiac Killer has come to San Francisco.
More than 40 years later, the mystery has never been solved. And now, one man claims to have indisputable evidence. He knows who the killer is.
This morning, the desperate manhunt for a possible serial killer in a Tampa neighborhood. 3 unsolved murders in 10 days, just about 10 blocks apart.
I was just watching TV and I hear boom, a pause, and then boom, boom, boom.
Those first shots were fired on October 9th, police say, when 22-year-old Benjamin Mitchell was killed. 4 days later, 32-year-old Monica Hoffa's body was found down the street and around the corner. And the most recent victim, 20-year-old Anthony Naiboa, killed on Thursday, just 200 yards of the first shooting.
Whoever's doing it is obviously able to vanish very quickly. We have not ruled anything out.
Police believe all 3 are connected because they happened so close to each other in similar fashion at night. Little evidence has been made public. The only lead is this grainy surveillance video of a person of interest wearing a hood in the area the night of one of the killings. Now police urging residents to keep their porch lights on, handing out light bulbs if needed, and being told to stay in groups.
If you're walking alone, you're either a suspect or you're a potential victim.
Gary Stewart, author of a new memoir, The Most Dangerous Animal of All, says the serial killer is his father, Earl Van Best, Jr. Stewart, a Louisiana businessman, made the startling discovery after a 10-year search helped him identify Best as his biological father. This photo shows a striking resemblance between Best and a sketch of the Zodiac Killer. Gary Stewart's father died in 1984, but he says forensic experts have matched his father's handwriting to cryptic notes the killer left behind. So far, San Francisco police have not reviewed the book, but they have investigated and cleared more than 2,500 other suspects. The killer claims he murdered as many as 37 people, but the evidence, including letters and cards the killer sent to the press and swatches of bloody clothing, have baffled detectives. As of today, the Zodiac Killer has only been officially connected to 5 deaths.
I see him pull his knife, and in one fell swoop, I feel the knife buried in my back.
Brian Hartnell was stabbed 8 times while he was picnicking with his girlfriend. In 2007, he spoke to CNN's Dan Simon about the attacker.
He had some clip-on glasses that were either affixed to the hood or affixed to glasses underneath. The circle on the chest was a perfectly formed circle.
In an email to CNN, Hartnell says he's skeptical about this latest claim, saying there's been no time in the last 40-plus years when someone was not stirring the pot.
Research that I actually found out the whole truth. I knew from my mother's friends in the San Francisco Police Department that my father had a record that the SFPD said they would not share with me because what was in that file was so heinous it would destroy me.
Gary Stewart's father abandoned him when he was just a baby, 4 weeks after he was born.
Not only had he abandoned me, he was abusive to me. He locked me in a footlocker because he got tired of hearing it cry.
Gary was eventually adopted and didn't know much about his biological father. Then one day, it clicked while he was watching TV.
I see a wanted sketch of the Zodiac Killer, and it looked just like the only photo I had of my father, which was his mugshot.
The man in the photo, Earl Van Best Jr. He'd been arrested for the statutory rape of Gary's biological mother. Gary started investigating Earl's life and now believes that his dad was the Zodiac Killer.
That's when I began to connect the dots that maybe this is what's so heinous, that he got away with it and they never caught him.
The Zodiac Killer murdered at least 5 people in California in the 60s. He was never caught.
2 more communications have been received from the person who calls himself the Zodiac Killer.
But the killer did send handwritten letters to several local newspapers. The letters also contained a code, which Gary says he was able to crack.
The Zodiac said, if you crack this cipher, you will have my identity. I immediately saw my father's name.
And there are many more coincidences revealed in the documentary.
What are the odds that Gary Stewart thinks his father was the Zodiac Killer, and they've got the same handwriting, the same scar, and they're in the same places?
Believing the Zodiac Killer was his father has been incredibly painful for Gary, but he has been able to move on with his life. Gary even visited the grave with his own son.
He said something to me then, Dad, this is you. This is not my legacy. So if my journey and my discovery has been that stopgap so my family can have normalcy and find a happily ever after, I'll be that sacrifice. I have found my happily ever after.
Best was never charged with murder and was never a suspect. And believe it or not, there have been several other people over the years who also claim they're the children of the Zodiac Killer.
Most prolific serial killers in California's history, nicknamed the Grim Sleeper, who preyed on mostly African American women in the Los Angeles area, is thought to have murdered at least 11 people and quite possibly more from the 1980s to 2007. The killer would eventually be found to be Lonnie David Franklin Jr. His victims were all women, and one was only 15 years old. He killed 8 women between 1985 and 1988, and then didn't begin killing again until 2002. That long break is what earned him the nickname the Grim Sleeper, because he slept between committing his grim crimes. Many of his victims were sex workers. One witness recalls that Franklin frequently brought prostitutes into his home. He shot all of his victims with a .25 caliber gun, and almost all of them came from similar neighborhoods, mostly black communities with poor families. In 1988, one of Franklin's victims got away alive and was instrumental in the court case against him nearly 20 years later. In Rita, Washington, then a 30-year-old mother of 2, was walking to her friend's house when a stranger pulled up next to her and politely offered her a ride in his orange Pinto. She gratefully accepted the ride. However, he drove her in the opposite direction of where she'd wanted to go. He told her that he needed to make a quick stop at his uncle's house to pick up money. They ended up on a side street where he allegedly parked at a house near an apartment building and an auto shop. He allegedly got out, walked up to the house, briefly talked to someone at the front door, and returned about 10 minutes later. He then drove her down a back alley where he shot her and then sexually assaulted her. After the attack, he started the Pinto again and then pushed Washington out of the car, where she picked herself up off the street and stumbled many blocks to the house of a friend who called an ambulance. She survived the ordeal and was able to give a description of her attacker. But it wouldn't be until 2010 when Franklin was finally caught through familial DNA testing, after his 28-year-old son, Christopher, was convicted of a weapons charge in the summer of 2009 and had to give a DNA swab. Once it was determined that Christopher was related to the alleged killer, detectives followed Franklin to a pizza place in Buena Park. As Franklin finished his meal, a detective who posed as a busboy collected a fork, a plastic cup, a plate, and a pizza slice left by Franklin. A few days later, DNA taken from the pizza slice came back as a match to DNA found on the alleged Grim Sleeper's victims. When authorities searched Lonnie David Franklin Jr.'s home after his arrest, they found 180 Polaroid photos hidden behind a wall in the garage. The photos were of women of all ages, ranging from teenage girls to young women, to others in their 60s, mostly fully or partially nude, and in various states of duress, with many of them beaten, unconscious, or seemingly sleeping, perhaps dead. Some of the pictured women were identified and were still alive, and claimed the Grim Sleeper picked them up off the street and asked them to pose for photos. To this day, not everybody in the pictures has been identified, leaving police to believe he may have killed far more women than the 11 initially attributed to him.
Keith Weldon is well known in the paranormal community. He's an avid believer in phantasmic activity and has spent his life creating machines that can record and document ghosts as they pass through the world. His invention, the Weldon's Box, is meant to allow transcommunication with the dead, meaning that the living can converse with the dead and vice versa. These boxes have become extremely popular, but it wasn't until he and his group, the Chill Seekers, set up his Connect device in an antique store in Rocklin, California that he found something truly remarkable. The team was specifically brought in when the antique store owner asked for assistance with a couch that they felt was haunted. After setting up up the equipment, the team found nothing of interest. That is, until they started to crank an antique phonograph. Suddenly, the outline of a woman was visible dancing in the corner of the room, and this was only the beginning. After turning the music off, the figure moves to the couch and sits with their arm hanging off the edge. A team member was brave enough to approach the figure, who then takes her hand and even offers a hug. No one can be sure what sort of energy Weldon's machine was picking up, but it certainly resembles a human. Video involves a lengthy car chase outside New York City. Throughout, the driver seems manic. He's swerving all over the road, fully disappearing from view only to crop back up on the highway. The cops are confounded as the driver tears up the asphalt, driving circles around them. The most amazing moment comes when the car moves right through a solid chain-link fence before speeding off into the night. As the headlights disappear, the cops are left baffled as to how the car was able to move through the fence without disturbing it.
Did this photo capture a miracle? The image shows a glowing silhouette hovering above a pickup truck in northern Michigan.
I was just like, whoa! I thought, that's an angel.
Local Fire Chief Glenn Thorman says his home's motion sensor security camera snapped the photo around midnight. A second image shows the angel appearing to be flying away. His wife Rhonda is taking it as a sign her home is blessed.
We're just strong believers. So it was just awesome to have that picture come through, and there's just no way that it's not an angel.
So what do you see? Social media response was mixed. Definitely an angel, wrote one Facebook commenter. It looks like a moth that's close to the camera, posted another.
There's a lot of naysayers that make fun of it and whatever, and that's okay.
I do truly consider it a blessing. It's definitely an angel.